Hey, everybody. Welcome to Self Mastery Sundays. This is your coach, Steve Bacon, along with my vanilla brother from another mother, Erik Thureson.
I don't have one of those cool. I just don't have one of those cool
we got to get you one.
Nomenclature for because it just don't work. Like
Erik
nah,
Thureson.
that's not
No,
work.
it don't work.
That don't work.
That don't work.
Like Steve Bacon, you got the right vowels. You have the right. He got the right vowels in your vowels.
Did I ever tell you how that came about?
What?
This whole Steve Bacon thing. Did I ever tell you how that came about?
No, but is that what we're starting with?
Well, I mean,
sure.
Since you brought it up, right?
I mean, you brought it up.
Since you're begging to know, the way it came up was I was watching wrestling one day, and The Rock came out, and he was like, "If you smell," and I was like,
"The Rock is cooking,"
right? And I was like, and I was a huge WWE fan, and so I would notice. Right, it's not as good as it was back in the day. I'm talking about the Attitude Era, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, The Rock, yeah. And so anyway, I was like, man, they just keep saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. And over a while, people end up getting it, and then it becomes
their thing.
Yeah, their tagline. So I just got online one day, and I was like, it's your coach, Steve. It was like 7 years ago. I was like, it's Steve Bacon. And I just kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. And so many people have told me how much it annoys the fuck out of them.
Which is perfect because
it
becomes an earworm.
Now they can't. Now they're like, how come you didn't say it? Right. And that's how they introduced me.
Right.
So
right. Well, I've heard you also been referred to as Bishop Bacon.
Yeah, Bishop Bacon.
Now
that's why I'm dressed like a youth pastor today.
Yeah, I mean, you got the youth
First
pastor
episode,
vibes,
I had to dress like a youth pastor.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we're doing this, man, and thank you for doing this with me.
Oh, for sure.
You know, we're gonna say some things.
We meaning you.
I'm just saying, like, we're gonna get into some topics and some subjects, and we're into some perspectives that is going to shake people at their core.
Well, and that's largely why I wanted to do it, because a lot of the conversations that we've had offline in the last couple of years are meaningful, thought-provoking, challenging, like belief challenging.
Yeah.
Which I think is really great, because if we don't challenge one another, we're not making each other better. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the perspectives that you bring in, and we have some commonalities, which is also exciting. Like we both kind of grew up in the hood. Now, I don't look like I grew up in the hood.
Definitely not.
But South Central LA is definitely considered the hood, and there's pockets, obviously, but it wasn't like I've had a silver spoon in my mouth.
Yeah, you're old enough to have a wooden spoon in your mouth.
Oh my gosh, here it goes.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, here we go with the age thing.
I'm just saying, you grew up in the hood. I got it. You grew up in the hood, but I'm curious, like back then, like when it was the hood, back then, like when you was
farted,
young,
it was dust. Yeah, the whole
I'm just saying, like, just back then, like, was it just like grease? Like what? When was that like gang fights where you grew up? Like, were they just like, what I'm saying? Grease lightning, go grease light. No? Okay. All right. I'm just trying to get an idea of the hood you grew up in,
Yeah. Well, it's been great having this podcast with you. It started and ended all in one episode.
This is gonna be. I'd be surprised if we don't get canceled by the end of this first episode.
Oh, we'll get canceled as soon as
at least
publish.
Listen.
Okay, well, let's get to it. Why are we doing this thing? I think that's important for if anybody is still watching or listening at this point. I think it's important for them to know.
So this is where we start to get controversial a little bit. I was in a meditation and prayer. And I asked God, I said, I know you want me to preach, but I don't want to be a typical pastor. Like that's just standing in front of at a pulpit with a Bible in my hand that's not me. Right?
So it begs the question, why are you dressing like a youth pastor?
Well, this is the vibe. You know what I'm saying? This is the vibe.
You want the vibe, but
this
not
is the vibe.
pulpit.
You don't know what I'm gonna show up in the next one.
Yeah, a thong probably.
Listen, stripping for Jesus. You don't know. So you don't know. That was in my former life. Don't judge me, Eric. That was in my former life.
Don't accuse me of judging.
That was in my former life. Can I finish?
Please.
Can I finish my point?
Please get there faster.
Listen, so I'm sitting there and I'm like, God, you want me to preach? I got it. You want me to share these principles of self-mastery through a biblical reference.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of it came because I've been going to like men's groups and just different environments where people are in a church environment, but what I'm hearing is pissing me off. I'm hearing things like, you're not worthy of God's love. You're not deserving of God's love, but he loves you anyway. And I'm like, what? How does that even make sense? To me, it made absolutely no sense. And so I remember leaving a church one day and I'm asking God, I'm like, why do you want me, first of all, to be in these churches listening? Because I can't listen. It's hard to sit there and somebody tell you how you're not worthy and not deserving. And I said, because I know that's not how you love. And then just like that, God says, that's market research. I want you to know what they're not getting. Like, especially like in the African-American community, we have, I think it was one statistic I heard, it was 85,000 churches for 12% of the population.
Wow.
And yet there's still so much suffering, so much, poverty. And it's like, why? All the answers are right here. To me, the Bible is the greatest personal development book ever written. And every answer in every book ever written, on personal development, you can find right here in these pages.
Sure. Yep.
But it depends on the level of consciousness you're reading it from.
Yeah, that's true.
I am of the belief, and this may shake people, and this is why we're having these conversations. And let me just say this. If you're going to be a regular listener of this podcast, we ask you to do a couple of things. Number one, don't listen for agreement.
Ooh, yeah, that's good.
Don't listen for what you agree with, because if you only listen for what you agree with, then you'll even miss the growth points that can happen.
Right, because if you're listening for agreement, there's a presupposition of judgment.
Yeah.
You're listening coming from a place of judgment, trying to determine if you agree or disagree. You're sitting in a judgment seat in that space, coming at it from that. So to listen differently, what would that look like?
So they would take me to part number two is just, and also don't listen for disagreement, right?
Which is the other side of the same coin.
Absolutely. Yeah. The key to getting the most out of our conversations, right, is to listen just to listen. Don't listen for agreement or just listen to listen, and know that when you get triggered, that's your work.
Right.
That's your work. I once heard this woman say on another podcast, she said, if I said I hate your ugly blue hair, but you don't have blue hair, how would you feel? And I thought to myself, I wouldn't feel anything. I don't have blue hair. She said, but if you did have blue hair, and I said, I hate your ugly blue hair, and then you lashed out at me, it's because deep down, you don't like your hair either. And I just picked at a scab that was already there.
Interesting.
You got triggered because I'm poking at something that's already there, right?
Right.
But then also when we talk about people's belief systems, because that's what we're going to be poking at belief systems a lot during these episodes.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm saying don't listen for agreement or disagreement and just listen to listen is because a belief is a strong emotion attached to an idea that you have.
Right.
So when we attack that idea, you're going to feel all of the emotion. And I'm begging you to get past the emotion so that you can see what's there for you.
I think that is a key component of self-mastery.
Yeah.
To be able to not react when you're triggered and take a breath, recognize that you're triggered, and then be curious about, well, where's that coming from? Mm-hmm. And I have an example, if you don't mind me sharing, that we were in this event. We were actually in the same event together, and I was having a discussion with a good friend of mine, Martha, and I was acknowledging her for her greatness. She's amazing. She's in her 70s. The way that she shows up, the way that she serves, her love, her kindness, her gentleness, her power in which she shows up is remarkable.
Yeah.
And so I was acknowledging her for those things. And she turned around in this conversation and she said, "Do you know why you can see those things?" And I said, "No, why? Or I was curious I was playing along with the question, and I said, "Well, for me, it was just obvious that those are traits that I'm seeing in her." And she says, "Because you have those. You can recognize the things in me because those things are also in you." Game recognizes game, right?
Oh, that was cute. That was cute. Look at you trying to connect with the urban audience. I love it. Do y'all see?
Here we go.
Do y'all see?
Here we go.
I love it.
I'm trying to be like,
oh, hip and young. Go ahead. Game recognized game.
This is how our conversations go,
Let's
by
go.
the way. They might get derailed. It might go down some rabbit holes or some tangents. This is how it is. Anyway, so she says that, and I'm triggered. I'm like, immediately I want to dismiss the acknowledgement coming the other way. And,
Whoa.
And so I paused and I'm like, why am I resisting this encouragement from her? It was easy for me to give the encouragement, but it was difficult for me to receive it all in that moment. And I had to pause and get curious. And I said, why am I feeling that way? Why am I feeling this resistance? And so over the next 24 hours, it was a 3-day conference that, and then the next day I realized that I was like, I'm being resistant and I'm triggered to that. And that's this false sense of humility that, like, I don't want to take encouragement because there's a taking, right? And this is a podcast that we can talk about in the future, the distinction between taking and receiving. Because she was trying to give me a gift in the same moment, essentially, and I was resisting receiving that with the framework in my mind of thinking I was taking something from her.
Right.
It wasn't, because she was giving something to me. We'll unpack that at another time. However, the act of taking that pause and being aware and then getting curious as to why and doing the work and the meditation of where that was coming from really helped me to shift. And so the next day at that conference, I was able to receive those encouragements, and there was a ton of them that came that day because of some other work that we had done. That's just an example of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's an example of listening, not from a place of judgment. Listen from a place of curiosity. Listen from a place of what's coming up for you. When you are triggered, use that as an opportunity to pause, get curious, become more self-aware so that you can level up your self-mastery.
Yeah, I love that. And that was a beautiful example of in the moment using self-mastery, right? I was having this conversation with my brother Kasudi, and we started talking about the difference between the self and the I. And when I think of self-mastery, this is what I think about, right? Is that there's I, and this is an episode that we're going to get into when we talk about the I and the I am, right? But there's the
Mark
I.
that down. Another episode coming.
Right?
Before we're canceled.
But there's the I, which is the infinite, right? Which is the spirit of me.
Right.
Right. And if you really want to me give you a visual of what I mean by this, for those of you that are listening, is imagine that you want to go to outer space.
Which I do, by the way, so that's not a hard thing to imagine. Anyway.
Okay. So imagine you want to go to outer space. In order to go to outer space, what do you need?
Well, you need a rocket ship.
You need let me rephrase my question. Let me rephrase my question.
You need to be a member of Moondao.
Moon what?
This is not sponsored by Moondao in any way, shape, or form.
I don't even know what Moondao is.
Moondao is a community, and the community is around the idea of sending commercial flights to the moon and have some kind of, I don't know if it's a hotel or colonization or whatever, but the idea is to go to the moon without needing NASA or the government or anything like that.
What the that got to do with anything I was talking about?
You asked about going to outer space.
In order for your physical body to survive in outer space, you need a spacesuit.
Got it.
Okay. So I need a suit to survive in the harsh environments of space. My body is not built for that.
Correct.
Well, that suit also needs a computer system to monitor the everything, the oxygen levels,
water flow, etc. Yeah,
all of that, right?
Pressurization, yeah.
So the question becomes, if there's a spacesuit with a computer system, and I, Steve Bacon, and my physical body step into that spacesuit, am I the spacesuit? No. I am Steve Bacon inside of a spacesuit that has a computer system.
That
so
correct.
When I think about our spirits, I am the infinite, the essence of who I am, inside of this physical body that has a brain, a computer system. It is my job to recognize who I am, where I am, and master the body and the brain. To me, that's self-mastery.
Yeah.
To separate the I, the infinite, the spirit of who I am, from the physical being of who I am.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And the example that we ended up giving was, and I thought this was super clever, I know what I need to do, but I can't get myself to do it.
The suit.
Mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
So there's the created version of us, and we'll get into a whole nother conversation about that.
Yeah.
But then there's also the infinite
right.
of who I am, the essence, the spirit of who I am.
Yeah. Well, Paul talks about that in Romans 7. There's this whole chapter in the book of Romans where Paul says, I know the good that I want to do, Paul, but I don't do it. I know the bad or the evil or how I can't remember exactly how he phrases it, but he says, I know the bad that I don't want to do, and I continue to do that. And that's a great illustration of what you're saying, having that awareness of the I versus the suit.
Right. That is like being able to separate who I am from who I'm being, and being able to have that. And one of the ways that I teach my clients to do that is to talk about themselves in third person. Like if you take the whole arrogance part out of it and be like, look at Steve getting mad. Look at him. Just upset. That's separating who I am, my God self, from my ego.
Right.
Right?
Well, and it's that pause, right? It's the pause in the space that gives you, so referring to yourself in the third person in that sense, to me, how I interpret that is that that's giving you yourself the separation or the pause to recognize from a different perspective the reaction.
Yes.
Or the action or whatever the behavior is.
Because if I don't give myself that separation, then I think I am that action and that behavior.
Right.
And then I feel even more guilty and I feel even more shame. And now I have even more limiting beliefs that get created from that.
Right.
And now I think I'm even less deserving of God's love. I'm even more unworthy of God's love because look at how I'm behaving.
Right.
But you only feel that way because, and I shared this at a men's group. I said, it's really hard to control the flesh when you don't know how it works.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's so really many good. People, right? Talk about, oh, well, I have a hard time controlling the flesh. Like, and then they feel unworthy and undeserving. But it's because you have no idea how the flesh works.
Yeah, and there's no separation from you and the suit.
Thank you.
The computer in the suit is running the show as opposed to the guy in the suit that's supposed to be running the suit and the computer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what God was like, this is what I want you to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I want to do it differently. And God was like, and literally a friend called me that morning and was like, I see you doing like some kind of podcast called Self-Mastery Sundays or something like that. And I was like, yo.
Did he see you wearing this outfit?
And then I was in a prayer and a meditation and it just came through. And like the tagline was, where we focus on the glue of life. God, love, and you.
Wow, that's amazing.
To give tangible answers to questions that the people in the church got.
Yeah.
But they ain't getting.
Wow.
And that's because they're either they're only getting religion. And you and I both know from our own personal studies that when you learn the science, it doesn't take you away from God.
Right.
The science takes me closer to God because now I understand God at a level that I never understood him before. I even understand me. And so we committed, you and I, to teaching faith and science.
Right, because who created the science in the first place?
Right. And it's like when we talk about the universe or quantum physics or something like that, people's like, oh, you're trying to take God out of it. No, I know God. First of all, we're going to have a whole episode on just that word.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But for now, I know God created the universe, but that doesn't mean that the universe isn't a tool that I wasn't put here to use. There are laws to the universe. I go to churches and I be like, look, you ever wonder why the people you judge and you call heathens live the dream lives that you wish you could live? You in here holy, broke, and sick.
Right.
Because there are two sets of laws. There are spiritual laws to govern the inner peace.
Right.
But then there are universal laws that govern worldly success.
Yeah, as well as time, space continuum, laws of physics, et cetera, et cetera.
And I am of the firm belief that if you do not understand science, then you will never get everything there is to get out of the Bible. Because there's so much in there. Like, I'll give you an example. As a man thinketh in...
He doeth.
Canceled. Right?
I mean,
as a man
true?
thinketh in his heart, so shall he be. But most people don't recognize that heart means subconscious mind. And they have no idea how their subconscious mind works. So that's what I mean. Like, it's really hard to control the flesh and obey God's word when you don't understand how the flesh works. You don't even know why you do what you do.
Yeah.
I don't know why, I just keep gambling. I try to fight it. I get down and I pray and I try to fight it. Your conscious mind, your willpower, trying to fight your subconscious mind is like me getting into a fight with King Kong.
Wow, your subconscious mind is King Kong?
It's 40 million times more powerful than me. It controls 95% of what I do every single day, but I have no idea how it works or how to control it or reprogram it to work in my favor.
Right. Yeah. I'm taking some moments here to consider what you're saying. I am of the belief that science supports who God is, the good, omnipotent designer. And I do believe that those things work together in tandem.
Absolutely.
That they're not separate and independent of one another or mutually exclusive, let's say it that way. Mm-hmm. And I'm wrestling with the idea that if I don't understand science, which I do to some degree, I studied chemistry and geometry and biology and all those things in school and did pretty well. And even at this point, I'm thinking that do you have to understand science to be able to have that connection and that relationship with who God is?
No, not at all.
And I ask that because I want that to be clear, because that could be misinterpreted the way that you phrased it earlier.
I appreciate that, and
like if you don't understand science, you don't understand God, that type of thing. So
not saying,
and I know people are thinking in absolutes at some time.
Yes,
they're like, wait, and don't listen for judgment. Don't listen for right or wrong.
What I'm saying is that, and when I talk about science, I'm not talking about chemistry exactly. I'm talking about how our mind works. How our belief system works,
right? How
our value system works.
Most people don't know that.
But that's what I'm saying.
Most people aren't doing that kind of work. That kind of work's not being taught in traditionally in school.
Absolutely not.
As your general education.
But it also, goes to learning what double-minded actually is.
Ooh.
And how double-mindedness affects.
That's a word.
Right? Your prayers. Right. One of the things that I love when I listen to one of my favorite books called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh is that every prayer gets answered. But it's not the one that comes out of your mouth that gets answered. It's the one that you believe deep down inside. If I'm praying for my rent to get paid, but then deep down believe it's not going to happen. That's the one that actually, and I'm creating more of my reality than I actually know.
So that's the duality of double-mindedness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? What's coming out of your mouth and what you actually believe are two completely different things.
Right.
And it's not what's coming out of your mouth that creates, it's what's going on emotionally inside of me, because the science, frequency.
Right.
So to separate frequency from the Bible, I think is irresponsible.
Right. Well, I mean, even in
because it exists
in the very beginning, when some people are going to get triggered if I use the word creation. That's fine. Go ahead. Frequency is what created. God spoke, and in Genesis chapter 1, it talks about the Spirit was hovering over the waters when the earth was formless and shapeless.
Yes.
Hovering, translated, is vibrating.
Yes.
Which is a frequency, and it could also that frequency of sound, right? Frequency of light and sound are measured in frequency, and the vibration that's how the energy was transferred.
Yeah.
When he spoke, it came to be. And that speaking, even as we are speaking, is coming out in sound waves, in a frequency, and the tonality is dependent on that frequency, that energy that's being transferred. Again, why our words are powerful to build up or to destroy.
Yeah.
Which we should be really a lot more mindful of that energy transfer and those words that we speak. Anyway, sorry.
No, I get it. No, that was brilliantly. No, that was brilliantly laid out. And it's so funny to me how people are like, "Oh, protect my vibe," but they have no idea what vibe actually is.
Exactly.
Right? They have no idea what that actually means.
It's short for vibration.
But it's like, no, I love how you just brilliantly laid that out. And we are energy beings. We are spirit beings with an intellect inside of a physical body.
Yeah.
And when you don't want to understand frequency and vibration, you don't really want to understand yourself, because you are not the physical body.
That's because people stuck on the suit.
Right.
Back to your example earlier, that they are the suit is the embodiment of them, and they don't know how to separate the two, right? And them being the suit leads to, well, when the suit fails, death, and not having, like, the unknown beyond that, and not realizing that your spirit, your soul is that energy, is infinite. Not having that understanding propagates the fear of death.
But is that not why Jesus said there is no fear in death?
I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Because you can't die. You are an infinite being.
Right.
Spirit is energy. It cannot be created nor destroyed.
Right.
And it can only transmit from one object. Yeah, exactly.
Don't be afraid of men who can only kill the body. They can't kill the spirit.
Which is you. But then it's like, well, how could it just be me? Because I'm Steve.
Right.
No, that's the ego. That's the separation. But that's when we get into talking about the sunbeam from the same sun. That's a whole nother.
Oh, for sure.
But to our point, the point of doing this podcast was there are people leaving the church in droves.
Right.
The church congregations are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because people are not getting the answers that they're looking for. And I put it this way.
Right.
Because this was me
legalism
too.
And the doctrine, dogma, and those types of things. There's yes.
People mentally want to be free. And so many people right now are wandering the desert looking for the promised land, which is inner peace. Heaven right here on earth. Yeah. And I truly believe that when people understand self-mastery, they will understand inner peace, and they will understand what it truly means to experience heaven on earth right where you are.
Right.
And so this podcast is for those that are wandering the desert looking for the promised land.
Yep.
They left religion. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They just know that they are tired of being told and feeling that they're not worthy and that they're not deserving and that they ain't shit and they ain't gonna never be shit and ain't shit they could do about it.
Right. Well, imagine if let's take that example and exercise our imagination for a second. Imagine if your father in the nuclear family said you're not worthy of my love. You're not worthy. You're not worthy. The mother in the nuclear family saying, well, you're not worthy of what your dad gives you but he's going to give it to you anyway.
How
does that make you feel? Like, how do you, like, you know, you put it in a pretty clear way, and in evangelical Christianity and across the country here in America, that's the dogma. That's the generality, right? I'm not gonna get specific in every detail because I don't have experience with every detail. Mm-hmm. But in general, that's been my experience. And those things, to your point, are, imagine if that's how you grew up as a child, like in your family. Everybody's got different types of family dynamics. I understand that.
But there are a lot of people that grow up like that as a child.
And there's a lot of dysfunction out there. I understand that. I mean, for me personally, I didn't get that. Like, I didn't say I wasn't worthy. I also wasn't told I was worthy. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, I was largely left to myself.
Right.
My mom, bless her soul, she was still trying to figure it out. She was young. She got married young and got divorced when I was 2 and did the best that she could, but she moved back to her parents' house. So my grandparents, who were a whole generation before, tried to pour in a lot of traditional values. But things like love, affection, worthiness, positive affirmations were not in. It was largely absent in my household, mm-hmm. in my upbringing, and I share that in the framework of this idea of not being worthy, this idea or this communication of, oh, you don't deserve God's love. I don't deserve my Father's love, like in the sense of the family. Well, why wouldn't I? Why don't I deserve my Father's love? He's my dad.
Right.
Regardless of what I do as a kid, the trouble that I get into or the good things that I do, that doesn't affect whether or not he loves me or not.
Right.
It also doesn't affect whether or not I'm worthy or not. Mm-hmm. I think what happens is the worthiness of it or the deserving of it gets skewed when the idea of you can earn it.
Which is
But that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't earn it because it's a gift. It's freely given. The Father, I mean, I'm thinking of even myself as a father with my kids. Man, I love my kids. There's nothing they can do to earn that love because I give it to them freely.
That was the biggest breakthrough I ever had spiritually, is when I sat with God and I said, I want to feel your love. And he said to me directly, there is nothing you need to do to earn my love. That is a concept made up by your brothers and sisters of old, so they can get what they want out of you. But there is nothing you need to do to earn my love. I love you simply because you exist.
Right.
And I thought about myself as a father, just like you said. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Good.
But I looked at my son Christian and my daughter Kaya. She's not even here yet, so there's nothing she can do.
She'll be here soon.
To cut 30 days, right?
Yeah.
But she's not even here yet. And the amount of intense love that I feel.
Oh, yeah. Cam's like telling us stories about how mad you get just because she's pushing on her own belly.
Don't be
like who are you to
I
tell
mush
her not to
I
push
mush
on
her in
belly?
the damn face and be like, how do you like it somebody mushing you? Right? But it's funny But at the same time, I'm like, this intense love, and she's not even here yet, and there's nothing she's needed to do to earn it. Just simply because she exists in my wife's belly, there's this intense love that she could do nothing that would make me not love her. And so this is my issue with the church, is you as a man are sitting there telling me that I have to earn my Father's love when he is telling me directly that there is nothing I need to do. And I can't see how, as a father, as the created, being more loving and forgiving than the creator.
Let me pause for a second on that, because my experience hasn't been that in the church that they're saying that you need to earn it. And I don't think that's the particular point. The point is that you made was not being worthy or deserving. Right? There's a distinction there. The distinction, largely in most churches that I've experienced, they will communicate that you can't earn God's love, it's freely given. They will say that. And in the same breath, say that we're not worthy and we're not deserving of his love. And I think that's where it gets skewed, because the idea of that isn't truly rooted in truth. And the truth of the matter is we are worthy and we are deserving of his love, as he is our Father. In that sense. In the same way, Kaya is worthy and deserving of your love, because you're her father. It's not about what the suit does, and it's not about any of that. It's not about the behavior of the suit or the malfunction of the computer in the suit or any of those things. The languaging behind that creates this dichotomy in people's beings, and that's why they're stuck.
Yeah.
And the languaging that is being created in the phrases of, oh, I'm not worthy, people are saying that to themselves, and their internal limiting belief programming, it's coming out, and they're just continuing to reinforce that with whatever issues they're having in their behavior, or like to the example that you talked about, they're trying to fight the whatever the thing is, and there isn't anything we can do to earn it, because it's free. It's given to us free, and we are worthy and deserving of that love. In the same way he created us, in the same way we created our children. Now there's obviously some spirit energy that's happening beyond our physical suits, if you will. Though I hear that language, and there's a dichotomy, and that's where I get a little bent.
The trickiness in that language, though, is, and this is what I mean, is man telling me, oh, well, he loves you anyway. And then man, I'm not saying God, man will be in the same breath be like, but to please God, this is what you need to do. How is that not, as a common person, suggesting to me that I need to earn God's love?
Yeah.
That this is what I need to do in order to make sure that God is pleased with me.
Yeah, I think there's a misappropriation of that idea, and that's where the dogma comes in. That's
right,
where
but that's where we're talking about the confusion.
Exactly. So let's spin that around as the child, right? Let's spin that around as Kaya in this example.
Mm-hmm.
Kaya feels your unending love for her.
Mm-hmm.
How does she respond to you for that? Right? It's a relationship. Right? She will grow up to be her own individual person.
Mm-hmm.
And how does she respond to your love? Now, she might get to a point where she's not appreciating your love. And she's feeling like your love is a little overbearing. Maybe it's a little overprotective. Maybe she's feeling that she wants to do her own thing. But you have the foreknowledge because you've lived some life. And you're like, well, I know where that's going to lead. I don't think that's a good idea. And you looking at me being the protector and loving you unconditionally, I don't think you should be doing that. She goes and does it anyway. Now she's disrespecting you. Now she's disobeying you. Do you love her any less?
Two things. One, because this is where mastery comes into play emotionally.
Exactly. Yeah.
Two things. One, she's not disrespecting me. She's disrespecting herself. And the only reason why she's disrespecting herself is because she doesn't know who she is. That's number one. What was the second thing you said?
She's disobeying you.
Okay.
She's disrespecting you and disobeying you.
I gave my daughter free will to make her own decisions. Now, I gave her guardrails and I gave her some guidance, but ultimately it's her life.
Right.
She's not disobeying me because I gave her free will. I'm allowing her to experience herself.
Sure, that's big. That's big picture. I'm talking about in the practical sense. In the practical sense, you've said to her, this isn't a good idea. I don't want you to do this.
Right. It's not a good idea. And are you willing to live with the consequences that come with it? Because this is literally what I teach my son.
Sure.
I teach this to my son every night when we have a call. This is what I'm telling you should do based on my life experience. But it's your life. I'm going to let you make your own decisions. The question is, are you willing to live with the consequences that come with that decision? And those consequences are not me punishing you. Those consequences are built into the law of something I created called cause and effect. If this is what you do, this is the effect that you get. When you take cause and effect out of it, then you take it as if I'm stepping in and punishing you and I'm displeased. No.
Sure.
And that's why I love what Dr. Miles Monroe said. God is not punishing you. The judgment is built into the law of cause and effect. I don't need to punish you. I'm telling you, don't smoke cigarettes because it will poison your body and give you cancer. And now you start smoking cigarettes and you get cancer. I am not mad or I'm not punishing you.
Yeah,
I told you the effect was you smoked. You're going to get cancer. So now you smoking and smoking and smoking and smoking for 40 years. And now you get cancer and it's like, God, why are you punishing me? I'm not punishing you. That is the effect of your decision. You just don't want to take responsibility.
Right. Yeah.
We can look at that at any situation. I'm talking down to my wife. I'm talking down to my wife. I'm talking down to my wife. And now my wife leaves. Oh, God is punishing me. God's not punishing you. That is the effect of that is the output of the input.
Right.
The judgment is built into the laws. So to make me think that my father is punishing me is cruel. It is absolutely cruel. And so my question becomes, and now I'm really passionate about this, is did God create us in his image or did we create God in ours?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
Because a lot of the attributes that human beings assign to God is the same attributes that we show when we ain't happy with somebody. I hold a vengeance. I'm telling you what you need to do to please me.
Let me ask you this. Is it possible to disobey God?
I don't think it's that black or white. I think just like parents, there's what I'm telling you is best for you,
right?
But you could do what you want to do,
which is what happens anyway,
right?
Yeah.
The beautiful part that I'm experiencing as being a father, and I feel this is just my personal belief. Anybody could believe what they want to believe. My personal belief is the purpose of us being parents is so that we can understand our relationship with the Creator.
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
100% agree with that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, what is the emotional level of intelligence that you are dealing with? Or that you are dealing with your child? Because that also has a lot to do with your perspective on your relationship with the Creator. If you are a hateful person, if you are a vengeful person, right? Your outer reality reflects who you are on the inside.
Exactly.
So is it also possible that even though as we're all parents, depending on the level of consciousness that you exist at, you get completely different?
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm vibrating at a lower level in anger versus vibrating at a higher level at forgiveness or patience or love, then my doing, which is my behavior, my attitude, the way I show up in those situations, are going to be coming from my being.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, and I 100% agree that relationships that we have, the nuclear family was designed in a way to help us understand our relationship with God. And I think we mess things up. There's a lot of dysfunction, and that can skew because of our experiences or our limiting beliefs, or all of these different factors can skew our understanding, our feeling towards God, the Creator, the designer, the good omnipotent designer.
You loving that?
It just hit me.
You loving that? You came up with that at the beginning, and you're just gonna keep. You're gonna keep. You're doing what I said. You're just gonna beat us over the head with it until.
I'm not. Here's the thing, and you know my story. I lost my son 4.5 years ago, and
shout out to Jacob.
One of the things,
hella sketchy.
One of the things that the lessons. Now, I've been reading scripture for 30 years. And one of the things that hit me in a very profound way was this, right? My son's coming up. He signs his record deal. He's 17 years old. He's got all the resources that he could possibly want. He moved to LA so he could be closer to the recording studio, and we let him do that. And so he's get this big chunk of money, and we have the potential to be able to limit his access to his money. As a 17-year-old, imagine being 17 years old, having your own place, having a...
How much money are we talking about, though? How much money I got? I'm 17.
I mean, it's a lot. It was multiple six figures. So we can say that.
17 with multiple six figures, boy. I was at 17.
Imagine. And so we had the ability.
We don't make it rain.
No. Let me finish my story.
Okay, I'm sorry. By the way, I just got to say, I'm going to let you finish your story. But at some somebody point asked me, it's like, why do you want Erik Thureson as part of your podcast? Like, why? Why do you pick? Because you've been reading scriptures. You said 30 years. You've been reading scriptures as long as I've been alive. And that is the reason why I knew you would be perfect. That is mastery, my brother. But go ahead, please finish.
this podcast is going to end after the first episode because Steve is going to end if he keeps up with these old jokes.
They're not old jokes.
Mm-hmm.
They're not old jokes.
Anyway.
Old realizations.
I will cut.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
Anyway, the point is that we had the ability, because he was still a minor, to limit his access to his funds. And that situation was presented to us. And we knew he struggled with a mental health condition. We knew he struggled with substance abuse because of the mental health condition. And no one in their right mind is going to give their 17-year-old unlimited funds. But yet you have the story of the prodigal son. The younger son comes to the dad and says he wants his share of the inheritance, which was half of his inheritance. His dad hasn't even passed yet. He said, because I want to go off and do these things. And the example in the story is he writes him the check. He gives him half of everything. Writes him the check. Knowing full well exactly what he's going to go and do. I'm imagining that the younger son was 16 or 17 years old. You know, that ripe age when you know everything and you got it all figured out. And you can.
My son just turned 13 and he went from this really sweet boy to a complete asshole overnight. Overnight. I was like, bro, like, what happened to you? Like, and I was like, oh, 13. Yeah, I got it. All right.
But the dad wrote the check. The father in that story wrote the check. And when I think about that story, we've heard that story thousands of times. Even people that don't go to church have heard the story of the prodigal son, right? The older brother stays there, works the farm or works the ranch or whatever the situation is, and is bitter because he's done everything the right way. And he's bitter at his younger brother because his younger brother got his half and done his thing, and he comes to his dad. He says, why haven't you given us a small goat to celebrate with my friends? And he's bitter when the prodigal son comes back and returns. And he puts a ring on his finger, a cloak on his shoulders, and celebrates with the fattened calf, right? Like they have this massive feast out of gratitude for having him back. And the older brother was also bitter at the dad. Like, that, why did you give him the hat? Like, you don't get your inheritance until you pass. Like, what is going on right now? But he gave him the check. Right? And I've had people ask me, why in the world would you let your son move out at 17, having all this coming at me? And I said, well, have you heard the prodigal son? Not saying that Jacob was the prodigal, even though there's some similarities in the story. Because when people listen to that, they put themselves in the seat of A, the prodigal son, or B, the older brother.
But not the father.
They don't consider themselves in the seat of the father, because typically that story is told as God being the father role. You know, reading the Bible 30 years ago has one aspect of how I interpret it, and reading the same thing now,
right,
30 years later, it hits me in a different way, because I'm a different person, because I've learned a degree of self-mastery that I didn't have 30 years ago,
right,
that I'm exercising now, and I'm reading things differently. And it's also being mindful of, people are going to interpret these scriptures differently depending on their experience, the culture that they grew up in, their understanding of what the language is that they're reading, right? We talked about words creating your world, words being creating. Those words and how those have been translated in specific languages. We know today that one word in one language doesn't mean the same thing as that same word in a different language.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, there aren't translations for it. So with that in mind, I think the principles that we can pull from that in the idea and the heart and provide context and framework, but also being in a place of grace and a place of understanding that contexts can be different.
Mm-hmm.
The context in a lot of what the scripture is talking about was in the first century. First century looked a lot different than the 21st century.
Right.
So.
No, you're right. And I think that's the reason why it's written ambiguously. It's so that it can stand the test of time. It just depends on, and I'm a follower of Neville Goddard.
Yeah, I've read a number of his things.
Love Neville. Mm-hmm. Neville was a cold piece of work. He really was. And Neville, in his book, Interpretations of Scripture, writes that the mystics who wrote the scriptures wrote it as a psychological drama to illustrate the different levels of consciousness of the human being. And that when you're reading a story, think about what you just said. This is a perfect example. When I read it 30 years ago, I read this story as the prodigal son.
Right.
I go back and read the story 30. Yes, that's the same. So that told you what level of consciousness you were on.
Right.
I identify with this character, so this is where I'm at in life.
Right.
30 years later, you go back and read it, and now you're reading it as the father. So you're getting a completely different level of lessons and perspective from that. So when you talk about reading it as a psychological drama and recognizing who you identify with and what that person needed to overcome, it's telling you a lot of who you are.
Oh, of course, especially because in the context of church, no one is identifying with the Father.
Yeah.
Let me say that again. In the context of church, in the prodigal son story, no one, and I've heard 25 plus years of lessons on that same story, no one puts anyone in the seat of the Father. That's why when I read it that way, that was a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Not that I'm trying in some way to put myself on the same level as God. So let's not get it twisted.
Right.
But to read that in that form and understand that's an element of the story that no one talks about. He wrote the
But the only reason why somebody would accuse you, someone would accuse you of putting yourself on the same level of God is that they are programmed to believe that that is who that is reserved for.
Yeah, no one's accused me of that.
No, I'm saying if someone were to, because you just said, I'm not putting myself on the same level.
Right.
But if someone was, it's because that's the story that they were told of that's who that belongs to.
And the conditioning of the telling of that story for so many years the same way. And to your point, God gives us free will, freedom of choice, probably one of the greatest freedoms that we have, period, as a human being. And I'm looking forward to unpacking that idea even further, because freedom, we had a great conversation a for New Year's when we were talking about mental freedom and what that looks like. And I know I'm looking forward to doing a whole episode just on that.
Mm-hmm.
And man, my wife and I talked, and we were like, it's his money. We didn't, even though we weren't the ones giving it to him, it was his money. Like, he earned that. That was his contract. And just because society says you're an adult at 18 doesn't mean he isn't already an adult.
Mm-hmm.
That also was not necessarily looked on as a favorable decision. Like, why would you, we people coming at me. I'm like, I'm at peace with the Creator in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning different things from things that I've been reading for 30 years that 30 years ago meant one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was the prodigal son 30 years ago.
Right.
Now I'm sitting in the seat of the Father writing the check, knowing what potential damage he can do. And here we are. I don't have any regrets in that sense, because I know that we did everything we possibly could to give him everything that he needed to get better there. And it was a rough learning it, and the process was rough. We didn't have a lot of tools.
Yeah.
We didn't know a lot of those things. But to your point, even in that story, we have freedom. We have both the brothers in that story, freedom to choose to take the inheritance and squander it. There's also another possibility that could exist, is that someone might be able to take that inheritance and not squander it, and actually do some really good with it.
Right.
And make a difference and make an impact and serve. And I feel like in my life, for me, being the prodigal coming back and understanding God celebrating me and loving me, not about worthiness, not about deserving, not about earning. My response to him in that is that I want to go and make a difference for others. And for me, deciding to do this podcast is part of that. Having these conversations, unpacking difficult ideas. We've both done a lot of work.
Yeah.
And you've spent 30 years of your life investing in personal development and spent millions of dollars in coursework and studies and all of those things that make you a master in this space.
Yeah.
And we've both gotten to this seat in very unconventional and untraditional ways.
Yeah.
Which also is a similarity, which I'm grateful that our paths have crossed. And you obeyed the call to come to Arizona. We have, through a circumstance, were brought to Arizona.
Right.
And
not a coincidence.
And I don't believe in coincidences.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Divine appointments is what I believe in.
I've never believed in that. I've never believed in that. But there's hard things. There's hard things that we have to unpack, and I'm excited about doing this together and unpacking these things and unpacking these experiences and sharing them, and even there's things that we don't agree on, and being able to illustrate ways where we can
unpack those things.
When we can still
episodes.
Be unified and not agree. I think that's a skill that's lacking in today's society. Is that everything is so polarizing and so like, well, you this and you that, and you're
either with me or against me, and
right? Yeah, it's like,
and it's going to determine whether I love you or hate you. I hate you. That's not right, but that's the point of this podcast: is self mastery.
Exactly.
And after 30 years of studying myself, I have reached a level of mastery.
Exactly.
And mastery of self.
That's
or
right.
I wouldn't be where I am right now.
Yeah.
Statistically, on paper, I don't even know if that whole thing made sense. But on paper, I should not be alive.
This big tablet floating around in the sky. It's referred to as paper.
I should not be alive. I should not be a free man. I should not be married, successfully married, happily married. I should not be the fantastic father I am, the fantastic son I am to my father and was to my mother before she passed, the friend that I am, the leader that I am, right? As fine as I am.
Up in your youth pastor outfit.
But
feeling
but when you look
way.
at my resume from the first 20 years of my life, even up to the first 28 years, I should not be where I am in life.
Right. Yep.
And yet I'm here because of all the work that I was willing to do on myself, but also my willingness to let go of the backstory that I had subscribed to for so long. Well, these things happened to me.
Yeah.
And so this is who I am as a result. Well, who would you be without your backstory, right?
Yeah.
And so imagine being able to experience God's love from a place of nothing rather than your backstory.
Yeah.
When you get back to zero, like that's what I love about Jesus's teachings. Surely until you become like a little child again, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
But that doesn't mean young, stupid, and emotionally out of control.
No, it just means you don't have a predetermined idea of what things are or any kind of judgment.
Or who you are. You're just being. You're just there.
Right.
And that's got to be another whole episode right there, because we could talk about being childlike again.
I mean, purity of being, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And we'll give you those 3 steps the next episode. So tune in.
That's actually really good. We're really going to end on that.
That's right.
This is called marketing, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
We really want you to listen to the next episode.
If you want to know what those 3 things are, tune in next week with Coach Steve Bacon.
Thank y'all for listening.
And the professor of possibility, this guy.
Oh, that's it right there. The professor of possibility.
That's right.
Love that. We're going to use that going forward.
That's right.
Guys, we appreciate y'all for listening to our first episode of Self Mastery Sundays. Eric, I just want to acknowledge you before we close out. I know everything you have on the line. And most people don't understand like what your business is and what you do for a living, and how much doing this podcast put what you do for a living at risk. So I want to acknowledge you for that bravery and that courageousness that you have, because most people would never sacrifice their own well-being for the betterment of other people. And I know, because we've talked about the type of backlash we could possibly receive from doing a podcast, being canceled, right?
Not just a podcast getting canceled.
Or like
canceled.
I was watching an interview with Steve Harvey on Club Shay Shay. Shannon Sharp asked Steve Harvey, why don't you do stand-up comedy anymore? And Steve Harvey's, I loved his response. He said, because that will be the end of me doing TV. He says, at one point,
get canceled.
He said, at one point I had 7 shows on in the same week during the same season. I had Family Feud, I had Celebrity Family Feud, I had Big Shots, I had all this. He's all these shows.
Yeah.
And he says, if I do another stand-up, I'm going to get canceled.
Right.
He says, I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Because what I want to say, nobody will ever want to put me on family TV ever again.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
Something to that effect.
Yeah.
So I thought about that. I thought about you when I was listening to that.
Mm.
And I said, damn, the bravery that my brother is displaying by doing this podcast. I could already imagine some of the people listening to this. Just this first episode is just like, these guys. They don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, well, I wish my pastor. Let me have my pastor listen to this so they can make sure that we could. Let me get on there and right. I can already imagine. But for those of you that are listening, I want you to understand one thing, and one thing about what our intention is. Our intention is for you to fall in love with yourself. And the only way you can truly learn to fall in love with yourself is when you learn to master yourself. And when you begin to master yourself and raise in levels of consciousness, I promise you, you will start to experience a change in your relationship with our Creator. Because you will see yourself from a much higher elevation. So that's the purpose.
Yeah.
The suicide rates are going up.
Oh my goodness.
The incarceration rates are going up.
Yeah.
The addiction rates are going up. Everything is going up. And at the same time, people are leaving the very institution.
Mental health issues are at an all-time high, substance abuse, all of the things.
Because people are looking for answers. Right. And it's a lot of dudes out here, promoting trauma and calling it personal development.
Right.
That's another thing that's pissing me off.
Yeah.
The only question that really matters is, what would love do?
Yeah, that's a great one.
What would love do? I don't care what situation you in. If you just simply ask yourself, what would love do? Then you'll know what God would do.
Right.
Because God is love.
Right.
And when you master yourself, you will experience the joy and the beauty and the magic that every single day has for you. That's why it's called the present. Because every single day of life is a present.
Yeah, it's a gift.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
But you cannot appreciate that gift if you have not yet learned how to master yourself.
Right. That's right. That's right. Why don't we leave people with some questions to ponder to help unlock some of that?
Well, the question I would leave them with is, what is self-mastery to you? Like, actually research self-mastery. Mm-hmm. Google it. Mm-hmm. Look it up. Find it on YouTube. What is self-mastery? Mm-hmm. And begin to ask yourself, am I willing to go through the process of self-mastery?
Right.
And now I'm really about to get us canceled. You ready? This is the last thing I'm going to say, because I know I'm about to get us canceled right now. You ready?
I mean, am I ready for the end?
This is the end. First and last episode. You ready?
Yeah.
This is my firm belief. Jesus taught self-mastery. Mm-hmm. And for those of you, before you like, go research self-mastery.
Yeah.
Find out what self-mastery is. Right. And then go back and read the New Testament.
Yeah.
From that perspective. And you will see that Jesus was teaching self-mastery.
For sure. Absolutely.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is your coach, Steve Bacon.
Well, are you the coach in this episode, in these podcasts, or are you the bishop? What is it? Don't be pointing your finger at me.
With the professor of annoying.
That's Mr. Professor to you, sir.
Mr. Professor of annoying.
Of possibility.
We appreciate y'all for listening. This is the first episode. Man, we did it.
And hopefully not the last.
And hopefully not the last.
We'll see.
So if there's another episode next week, we will see you. We will see you there. Take care.
That's
God
right.
bless.